Welcome friends to another r/MaliciousCompliance video. Today we've got a great story of wearing a very interesting outfit to work. But first, a story from I Am JJ is me. If I can't drink here, neither will my friends. Back in my mid-20s, I used to wait tables at this restaurant in my hometown. The money was good and I got along well with everyone there. Usually after our shift, a few of the servers would sit at the bar and have a few drinks to wind down. You figure, why go to another bar when there's a bar right here? We always tipped well, and nothing was ever an issue. Until one day when the owner, out of nowhere, decided that employees weren't allowed to drink at the bar anymore. Now I completely understand this is a normal rule in other bars, and the owner was well within his rights, but I just didn't see where this came from. I asked the manager if we did anything wrong to warrant the rule change. He said the owner was just being a jerk. He told me he'd try to talk him out of it because there was no reason, but the owner just wanted to make his presence known. Okay, he's within his right to. However, what he didn't count on was Thursday nights and my friends. Back then, my friends were in a punk band and had practice every Thursday night. I would work every Thursday night, and they would meet up with me at my bar and grab a drink with me after my shift. And usually they'd bring their girlfriends, friends, and whoever was hanging around. My friends pretty much made the bars Thursday night as busy as a Friday or a Saturday. And when I tell you we could drink, oh, we could drink. And of course, everyone tipped generously, so when I told them I wasn't allowed to drink at my bar anymore after my shift, they were as pissed as I was. My buddy Bob was like, wait, so there's no point to go to your bar, and then for all of us to just go to another bar after you're done so you can join us? We might as well just go to another bar, and you can meet up with us after. It was the most logical solution. There was another bar around the corner. So, come Thursday around 9 p.m., I'm finishing up my shift as my manager approaches me. He looks at the empty bar and asks, "Hey man, are your friends on the way? They're usually 3 drinks in by now." I reply, "Oh, actually there are 4 drinks in. They're at the bar around the corner." My manager is dumbfounded. They say, "Wait, what? Why aren't they drinking here?" I calmly tell them, well, they want to drink with me, and I'm not allowed to drink here. Now, if you excuse me, there's a pint of Cane Head High, my favorite beer, waiting for me around the corner. I walked out and joined my friends for a fun night. Now, I must admit, I feel bad for the bartender who usually worked Thursday nights. She had no part in the decision, and her tip suffered because of our move. But that's on management, not me. After a few weeks, the owner noticed the dip in sales on Thursday nights and said we were allowed to drink at our bar again. However, the damage was done. We found out that not only did the bar around the corner have all the beers we usually drink, they were much cheaper. We also struck up a great friendship with the bartenders. We found our new hang spot. There was no reason to go back. Oh well. Let's say both bars were on total equal footing as far as price, drink availability. After they pulled a stunt like this, would it be even worth giving that bar another chance? Or is it not worth giving them another chance when they only caved because they noticed they got less sales? Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Our next story is from Luna Hyacinth. Supervisor can't grasp doctor's order. I worked at the Mart of Walls and had a supervisor from heck. I swear she thought she was a god amongst paupers and peasants. She and I never really got along, and I was usually the employee sent to do all the odd jobs like greeter or unloading a truck. Well, my health has always been an issue, and one day I had a few cysts rupture on the outside of my ovaries, causing internal bleeding, and my doctor told me I would need surgery. I told my supervisor and manager that I was going in for surgery and would be unable to work at all for 3 or 4 days after. They both said they hoped things went well and thanked me for telling them, and that they'd take care of the schedule. Well, the surgery went great, and after 3 days I was given the okay to go back to work, with a few restrictions. I turned in the doctor's orders that say no lifting of any kind and that I shouldn't be on my feet for an extended period of time. I was supposed to sit as much as possible so the incisions wouldn't open. Again, I turned it into both my super and manager. The next day, my supervisor calls me into the office with her and one of the other managers, not the one that was actually in charge of the section I worked in, to give me an attendance warning. Because apparently my supervisor had scheduled me for the week before, including the day of my actual surgery. I try to remind them she and my manager knew I'd be out and said they wouldn't schedule me, but she says she did no such thing and then tells me I'd been picked for truck duty so I better run over there. I pulled out a copy of my doctor's order that I'd stashed in my locker and show her that I can't lift anything. The witch had the nerve to say, "Well, you clearly can lift some things, otherwise how did you get dressed? You think I'm so stupid that I can't tell you made that whole thing up?" Before saying that if I didn't get over to the truck, I'd be getting another official warning. Well, I walked over to the loading dock and noticed she hadn't followed me, and one of the other managers was supervising the unloading. I went up to him and explained who sent me before handing him my copy of the doctor orders. That manager was at least competent and sent me back out to my section, and instructed me to get someone to pull over a stool from photo over to the register and take over as a cashier. At this point, I think all the stupidity is over, and that the rest of my shift would be uneventful, and I'd take out the accusations from my supervisor with my manager the next day. I'm sure by now that you can guess the stupidity of the day was far from over. As I'm sitting on the stool checking a customer out and simultaneously helping one of my coworkers set up a straight talk phone, the store phone starts ringing. And when I answer it, I hear my supervisor telling me off for daring to move a stool over to the register and threatening my employment because it clearly had been stated that we weren't allowed to sit while on the floor. Apparently she was up with loss prevention and saw me sitting on the job. Before I knew it, the raving lunatic of a woman had marched her way back to my section and told me to get off my lazy butt and follow her because she found a task for me that I couldn't possibly weasel my way out of. The witch all but pushed me into a room where they kept overflow inventory for health and beauty. The place was one giant rat's nest of chaos, with boxes upon boxes of shampoo and feminine hygiene products stacked with no semblance of organization. I don't remember exactly what she said verbatim, but I got the gist of it. Since you supposedly had problems with your own ovaries, you should be more than able to work with pads and tampons. I was instructed that I was not to leave that room until it was organized, my shift was over, or I was bleeding out. I told the idiot lady again that I could not lift and wasn't willing to risk it, to which she said I would either do as I was told or I'd be looking for a new job, so I better figure something out. She slammed the door and left, leaving me alone, surrounded by all these heavy boxes in an unair-conditioned room. Here's where my malicious compliance and inability to tolerate that woman one more day came in. Now, I wasn't really willing to go against doctor's orders, and I definitely had no remorse for what I was about to do. This wasn't my first time having a surgery like this. The 4 incisions were small, but 2 had overlapped with old scar tissue from the previous operation, and those 2 had a habit of oozing still. It's funny how adding heat and moisture can make other fluids spread farther. With substances like blood, it can make it appear as if there's much more present than there actually is. I'd checked my incisions earlier in my shift, so I knew the gauze definitely had some blood, and my plan was set. I looked around for a few minutes and sat down on the floor in the room to sweat and waited. I think I should mention that at this point, I'd already decided to quit. About 15 minutes before my shift ended, and about an hour since I'd been put in the room, I got up and left looking for the world's worst supervisor. When I found her, she was in the back and snapped that I'd better have finished already if I was out and about this far ahead of schedule. I calmly told her I'd just come back to get some fresh gauze from my locker. She rolled her eyes and told me to give up with my whole surgery bit because there was no way it was true. The woman followed me to my locker and stood by me, literally tapping her foot. What I hadn't quite expected was her following me to the bathroom. Apparently, she didn't expect to see what appeared to be blood-soaked gauze when I lifted my shirt. The heat and sweat worked magnificently, and it looked like I'd been bleeding heavily. There were a few trails where beads of sweat had taken some of the dried, oozing stuff with it. She almost immediately began backpedaling, saying she didn't know I'd had any restrictions from surgery, and demanded I go before the store manager. I showed him the doctor's note. She said she didn't get one. I told him to ask one of the 3 managers who had seen said note. She says I only showed them and didn't inform her. The manager that gave me my attendance warning says otherwise. She says she didn't ask me to do anything that went against it anyhow. Manager that supervised the truck unloading calls her bluff. He explains what he told me to do, and she tries to say I didn't do what he said. I remind her that she called from the loss protection office and said I'd be fired if she saw me sitting again. Then came the finale. I tell the store manager where I'd spent the last hour and how I was instructed not to leave until I'd organized it unless my shift was over or I was bleeding out at the risk of losing my job. I then informed them all that I was quitting immediately since I had clearly left the room early and I would rather leave on my own terms. The store manager tried apologizing, but I politely told him that I wasn't comfortable working beneath supervisors who not only ignored authentic medical restrictions, but accused their employees of lying about and forging the documentation of those medically necessary requirements. To me, this sounds like a big fat settlement check, and I feel like OP is doing themselves a disservice if they don't at least inquire into it. Our next story is from Vorhin. It's unprofessional to wear a bathing suit, wholesome. Part of my, female, job is to visit foster children monthly, and ideally to build positive relationships with them. This can be hard because I have a limited amount of time. They're scared of new people and they get bored real fast. A couple years ago, one of my favorite foster families got a pool, and all the kids could talk about was showing me their new pool. I mentioned it in passing to a supervisor on my way to the visit that I was looking forward to playing with the kids in the pool. The supervisor made a face of concern. I told her that I'd gone out and bought a particularly covered up and dowdy suit for this visit. She said that regardless of the style of the suit, it would be unprofessional of me to wear a swimsuit on the job. The kids, all 5 of them, were really brokenhearted when I told them that I wasn't allowed to wear a bathing suit. That was quickly alleviated when I jumped into the pool wearing my office outfit. I don't know if it ever got back to the supervisors, but I did end up being that family's favorite social worker. I just don't understand when it comes to foster kids and taking care of these kids. Why would there be a restriction like this that's wholeheartedly solely against having fun? The only thing is if you're wearing some kind of too revealing swimsuit. But straight up outlawing all forms of swimsuit, there's not a single good spirit behind that rule. And our final story of the day is from Nublet69. Okay, I'll get an invoice for my car. Some background, so I recently bought a car interstate. Now in Australia, each state has its own car registration rules. You can't live in one state and have your car registered in another. The car I bought was in Queensland, and I'm based in New South Wales. The seller agreed to ship the car to me unregistered so I wouldn't need to drive it interstate while messing with transferring registrations. So the story starts after I received the car. I checked the service NSW, basically the DMV website, and called the information line to ensure that I had all the required documents that had all the right information. Sellers and my details, bill of sale, insurance, etc. After gathering up all these documents, I went to Service NSW to get my new number plates for my car. As I'm sure you know, these sorts of places are slow and I had to wait a while to get to the front of the line. When I got there, I handed the person at the counter all of my documents. The person looks at them for a few seconds and says these documents aren't right. Now, I had a bill of sale with the sales contract terms, which had all the information they needed to change the registration. However, because the transaction took place interstate, I signed a copy and sent them to the original owner via email. He printed them out, signed them, and sent it back via email. The bureaucrat insisted that because this wasn't an original signed copy, it wasn't good enough. They did, however, say that an invoice from the original seller would be okay, and it doesn't have to be signed. So I went home and fired up Word, made a document that looked like an invoice by copy and pasting information from the bill of sale, went back to the service NSW, and got my registration and number plates. Some people need to learn to use their brains. How much do you want to bet that this person doesn't get paid enough to really care? To me, I think this person was just going through the motions and is like, "I'm sorry, sir, rules are rules. If you don't have the paper, I can't help you out." Even though OP could take a blank piece of printer paper, turn around and scribble the terms of the invoice on it, say that is the invoice and hand it back to them, and it should be okay. They just need to see some kind of paperwork that asserts to be what is an invoice. It's frustrating, sir, but rules are rules. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to see another malicious compliance story that was crazier than any of the ones in this video, click on that left video. Or, if you missed my latest video, click on the right. That said though, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.